This lecture is going to talk about how to utilize institutional assessment data for program assessment and talk about the importance of benchmarking. My name is Scott Heinrichs. I'm currently an associate professor at Westchester University. I have a background in assessment as well as strategic planning. This past academic year I served as our assistant vice president for academic affairs, where I was responsible for our academic affairs strategic planning efforts as well as our regional accrediting bodies periodic review report, which we are in the Middle States region. So for those of you that like assessment, I'm one of your colleagues. For those of you that don't really care too much for assessment, hopefully by the end of this presentation, also by the end of this course, you'll really have more of a desire to want to engage and think about assessment differently as it relates to education and program outcomes. When I think about assessment, one of the things that really resonates with me is, as a clinician, as an athletic trainer, we're always thinking about evidence-based practice and how we can improve patient outcomes by instituting different types of treatments or rehabilitations with our patients. And that's really the same as we think about learning outcomes or programmatic outcomes. We're trying to ensure what we're doing in our programs or what we're doing in our curriculum is effective, and we need to measure that via some type of assessment procedures. So as you can see, there's my picture. You're not going to be seeing me since we're from a distance, but that's who I am, and let's get started here. So the objectives of today's lessons are really to recognize the importance of using institutional assessment data and benchmarking for program assessment purposes, to differentiate between the types of assessment data that can be obtained at the institutional level for program assessment, and then also to choose appropriate ways for programs to use that data obtained from institutional data and benchmarking. So not only is it important for you to know how to recognize that this data exists, but really to think about ways to use the data to make it part of your annual plan so that it becomes part of your efficient and effective process. So first, what I'd like to start, and you can answer this by writing down on a piece of paper or up in your head, but how do you define student success? So if you were going to be asked by an administrator, a colleague, someone outside of the institution, as the public is now becoming more and more aware of student success, how would you define them? What words would you use? So hopefully you've written down a few words or have some things in your head, and then next, the question should be, how does your institution define student success? And take a minute now to write down some words with regard to how your institution defines student success. So hopefully when you look at your choice of words to define student success, or whether you have them in your head, hopefully there's a similarity between the ways you define student success and the way your institution defines student success. If there weren't all similarities, some of you may have been having a more narrow-minded approach when looking at your definition of student success to be more discipline specific. And that's perfectly okay in terms of, you want your students to be good consumers of content knowledge, or good evaluators, or good with patient interactions. That's perfectly fine, because we want those things. But also what we want for our program is what our institutions want, and really what the public expects, right? And those things really center on things like employment, being a licensed practitioner, licensed practitioner meaning passing a board of certification exam, graduation, retaining students. So those are things that you should want for your program, then also your institution wants. So if you define student success using those types of descriptors, such as students are employed, they pass board of certification exams, they graduate, we retain them, those are things that you need to be also looking at in your assessment plan, if that's how you're defining success. And we're going to talk about today how you can do that in a more efficient way. And this really isn't new in terms of student success, and there's really been a strong focus. If you look at the Chronicle of Higher Education, or if you just really are up to looking at other types of media such as websites, etc., on what consumers expect, but there's definitely more of a focus on outcomes in higher education. And as Barack Obama said, by 2020, America will once again have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world. And we need to ensure that our college graduates are getting out on time and that are also employed, right? So today, over 3/4 of the fastest growing occupations require education and training beyond a high school diploma. Yet nearly half those students who begin college in this country don't finish within 6 years. So those are alarming statistics when we think about tuition is continuing to rise, right? Putting college out of the reach for the very families that need it the most, the middle class. So a generation ago, America led the world in college attainment of young adults. We now rank 13th. So Obama administration really has a push towards outcomes in higher education for us to be world leaders in college completion and ensuring that every student has access to an affordable and high quality post-secondary education. So with that broader landscape in mind, it's even more important for us to do our parts at the programmatic level to see how we fit into that bigger picture. So really what we're talking about now is we're talking about a shift from shifting our focus to student success and not access. Because when students win, everyone wins. And when they lose, every part of our system should share the responsibility. So if we're not graduating students on time at the institutional level, we need to be funneling that down, and we need to be looking at that at a programmatic level. Or at a programmatic level, what are we doing to retain our students? What are we doing to ensure and we're tracking employment of our students? So specifically, to shift our focus from student success from access, we need to be looking at things like retention, graduation, and employment. These are key metrics that we should be evaluating on an annual basis and becoming part of our conversations with other program faculty in our departments and also within our colleges and also at the institutional level. There's also other ways to define success. There's institutional self-report surveys. So if your institution participates in the NESE, which is the National Survey of Student Engagement, that can provide you some interesting information that can be broken down at the college level or even at the student level to see your students' perception of their college experience. And does their perception match what you're obtaining if you're obtaining some student level data? Also, it's important to peer benchmark. We're going to talk today about how to peer benchmark within your institution of your Carnegie classification, but within your respective disciplinary specialized accrediting body, can you do some peer benchmarking? And from an athletic training perspective, we're starting to do that with our Commission of Accreditation of Athletic Training Education. But I can see more and more in the future of the specialized accredited programs being able to benchmark against each other. So for nutrition, the ASEN accrediting body, or for exercise science, KHAP, allowing institutions to see where they stand as it relates to graduation, retention, and employment when we compare these academic programs of study with other institutions that are similar to us in terms of size, geographic location, etc. So how does all of this fit within specialized accreditation? Well, all of our specialized accreditors, whether it's Ascend, whether it's KHAP, whether it's CATIE, they all have standards as they relate to assessment and outcomes. The nice thing about each of those discipline accrediting bodies is they're very open-ended on what they expect or ask programs to report on. So if you see here, this was taken from the KT standard on assessment, but I've evaluated KHAP's standard, and it's very similar to this, and ASEND is very similar. And what I mean by that is the accrediting body indicates that you must have a plan that evaluates all aspects of the educational program. So this includes programmatic features, learning features, or instructor perceptions, instructor satisfaction surveys. So you can see here, what we're going to pay more attention to today in this lecture is how can you, within your assessment plan, pay more specific attention to retention, graduation rates, employment rates, things that focus on student success but are not curriculum focused, like learning outcomes. Ascend has very similar standards, and then they have standards on learning outcomes. They also have standards on program goals and outcomes. There are really three parts to every assessment plan. Your assessment plan should have program outcomes. Your assessment plan should have learning outcomes, which are student learning outcomes that are based on what you want your students to know upon graduation as a result of their participation in your curriculum, right? Where program outcomes are looking at another aspect of student success, but specifically as it relates to graduation, employment, retention. The third prong of this three-prong approach to your assessment plan should be instructor effectiveness. So these are your professor or preceptor evaluation forms. They may be mandated forms because of a collective bargaining agreement, or they may be forms that you develop within yourself to better understand instructor effectiveness. Specifically today, what we're going to be focusing on are the programmatic outcomes pieces. However, there is definitely strong interrelationships between the three. So for example, if your program outcomes are showing you that you are not retaining students, or your students aren't passing maybe a board of certification exam, your learning outcome portion of your assessment plan should be informing those programmatic outcomes. So why are you not retaining students? Where are those bottleneck courses? Or if they're not passing the board of certification exam, what parts of the curriculum are they struggling in? So really each of these should inform the other. And they're not, though they're put in the three different compartments, they should be used to be looked at and evaluated in ways that show the overlap between the three. So this concludes part one of the lecture. The second part will look at how do we now look at these program outcomes in a more efficient and effective way so that you can measure them on an annual basis using tools at the institutional level.